Too bad. All right. All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. Hello. Hello. Good to see everybody. Jeffrey, Pablo, Thilo, Karsten, everybody's in here. So we're going to let YouTube get everybody notified on YouTube and we'll get started. There's Will. Oh, Renzo. Renzo, you'll want to come in to the StreamYard feed. You're going to have to be in the StreamYard feed. Tom Cavness, good to see you. Well, hello, Christine from Belgium. Welcome, welcome. Happy to see everybody coming in here. So let's do this. Let me open up my my secret compartment here called Google Drive and pull up this little keep me in line death by PowerPoint thing. Not really. It's not death by PowerPoint. This isn't even PowerPoint. Seems like it is, but it isn't. So let's do this. Let that load for a second. Okay. And we're going to say view, present. That looks good. Okay, let's go over here and we'll get this show on the road. So welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Quinn Jacobson and this is the Studio Q show live, at least live for us right now. And Linda from Stockholm, Sweden. Yes, it is the holiday season for some. For others, not so much, but that's okay. Everybody's got their choice to do what they like to do. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Hello, Jan. So good deal. We got a dozen people in YouTube now. Let's jump over here and start this presentation. We're going to talk about, I hope, some interesting things for you today, simply for the fact people do always ask the question of what should I read? And of course, I always say my book, right? I mean, but really, honestly, you're going to see how I've taken the primary literature, meaning the 19th and 20th century wet collodion literature. And I'm going to give you some ideas on how I've worked through those, how I've come up. You know, let me just preface this by saying nobody in the 21st, 20th, or 21st century has done anything new in wet collodion. Contrary to popular belief, it's not true. Everybody's in the same boat. There's just some of us that felt the need to try to communicate to a certain audience a little bit better on the technical aspect of this process. People, you know, it depends on your personal learning theory or style, how you consume information, what makes sense to you. So everybody's a little bit different. I'm going to show you how I've compiled some of my favorite literature from the 19th century and how a couple examples of what you can do and what I've done to venture out on your own. I think the modern literature is good for the most part because you don't have to decipher grains and minims and, you know, drachmas and those kinds of things. And that 19th century English, and especially if English isn't your first language, which a lot of you guys, you folks, ladies and gentlemen, do not speak English as a native language, it becomes that much more complex. So onward and upward, let's look at some 19th century literature and what some of my favorite stuff you can glean from. Now, again, this is some of it's beginner, some of it's advanced. I'm not going to go into the advanced stuff much, but I'll point it out and talk about it a little bit. Paul O'Neill, Ireland, great. Good to see you. First time live at home, isolating, just got negative COVID test. Good for you, Paul. We like to hear the negative COVID tests. Those are the best kind, right? Tom, I am not in the new house today. I'm still in my manufactured home on 2 acres. My other house is down the road 1/3 of a mile. We're still working on it. It's wow, I thought would be finished by now, and I thought would be in, just like everybody. What you think and what reality is can be 2 totally different things. So patience is not really a strong suit of mine, so I'm being challenged every day. But we have a lot of good things to work on. So hopefully in the next week or 10 days, we'll see how this pans out. Everybody will know when I get into my house, but let's go over here and do this. But I appreciate you asking about that. Oh, by the way, this background shot here, I posted a little blurb the other day on in Chemical Pictures, I think it was, on the Facebook forum. But I kind of outlined I'm jonesing now. I want to get my studio and my darkroom up, and I'm really jonesing to make some plates again. And I've been doing a lot of driving because of the house stuff. So when you drive around this part of the world up here in the mountains, all you see constantly are these great big gigantic rock formations that are just unbelievably beautiful. And as you dig into the literature, you'll find out that the Native American Ute tribe occupied this land for centuries and centuries before the white man came and colonized it all and renamed everything. If you've ever heard of Pikes Peak in Colorado, I'm about 14 miles from that, about 25 kilometers from Pikes Peak. But I posted a little blurb about doing this Red Mother Earth project and photographing these stone formations. A sacred Ute and Arapaho moved into this area as well from the plains up north. They migrated all over here, but that image that you're looking at behind my title slide there is the saying was Pikes Peak or bust. The gold miners, the white gold miners came up in here. So there he is. He threw up a cabin. He's got his wood burner out there. He's got his jugs and his pick and his axe and everything. That's a wet collodion negative, of course. And he's right here somewhere. That photograph was taken probably not too far from where I'm at right at this very moment. So let's talk about today's topics, the 19th century, early 20th century wet plate collodion literature. I don't comment on anything modern because it's not really relevant so much, but we're going to look at some selections from Gamble's book. I'm going to give you, that's what I said just a minute ago. We're going to look at some ways you can implement these ideas and go do some, primary and primary research, basically. You're going right to the source. It's not secondhand. It's not whatever. And you'll see some of these processes in my book as I show you some of the things that I've gleaned from these. If you do have my book, you'll see where I've taken some of these. Then we'll do some technical questions. After we do that, I'm sure, even if it's not related to the book or literature, we'll take some technical questions and try to answer those. And then we're going to have a critique. Renzo needs to get in here on StreamYard, and I'll look for him in a minute. So let's look at some of this early literature that I found. I've tried to get everything. If I see it, I get it, whether it's good or bad. And I've gone through a bunch of these books, and these are my absolute favorite. And the beautiful thing about Google Books is that you can download these for free as a PDF. Just search the title and the name. The links here wouldn't do you any good anyway. We'll look at these by title. I've got them listed by date. And so I'm going to start at 1851, obviously. And let me just say this. The early literature, some of it has some problems, and some of the later literature does too. But the later literature seems to be a little bit better. They had more time with the process and the variants and working with different things in the process. They learned a lot. So the later literature usually, not always, but usually is a little bit better, at least a little clearer to understand. And so I can't leave Archer out of this. I mean, that's his recipe from The Chemist in 1851. The Sutton books are good. The Treatise of Photography on Collodion, the Waldeck and Neff book, I got a lot of my information from that book. It's quite early, but it's still really good. And then Monthoven, I believe he's Belgium, if I'm not mistaken. That's a great book. And of course, the Silver Sunbeam is always, you should have that around. Some of it gets way into the weeds for people, but they're all really good to peruse. Second page, here we go with another little later Archer book, The Collodion Process on Glass. It's really interesting, some of the things he talks about in there. And you can tell how early it was at that point. It's really interesting when you start. It makes a big difference. And then some classics, Ambrotype and the Photographic Instructor, Ellis, A Manual of Photography, Carrie Lee. There's a lot of good recipes and stuff from those guys. Vogel has a nice one that's a later one. And then we get into some of the photographic negative stuff, which I really love. The negatives are really kind of what I actually love. The one here, An Introduction to the Practice of Wet Collodion Photography. I highlighted that because we're going to look at a couple examples from that. We've already talked about this book a couple of times, but I'll go into a little more detail here and show you some specific examples and maybe even challenge you a little bit with that. Estebrek, The Ferrotype and How to Make It. Got that. That's a great one. And you cannot leave out the Collodion and the Making of Wet Plate Negatives by Kodak. I think the original publication date on that was 1922 or 25. This latest one is really, really good, especially if you like negatives. It's really funny. Years ago, I actually published that in the back of my negative book. And early on, the first one I did in 2006, I think I published all the MSDS sheets with the book too. People actually got pissed off about that. It's kind of weird that this has nothing to do with how to do this. So, you know, maybe they might think a little bit different today. So you can screenshot these. I'll go back there. You can screenshot these or come back to the video, pause it, and just go over to books.google.com, search the title and the name, and download those babies. So let's look at a couple of examples of what I was talking about. So when I approach the process, I may have one specific thing that I'm looking for, but every time I go into the literature, I'm reading and I find something completely different that I've never seen before or never thought of. You know, a lot of this stuff, only time and experience will give you that ability to spot the things that you're interested in and connect the dots. So I'm going to challenge you with this first one. We talked a little bit about saltpeter in the past, potassium nitrate. I'm going to challenge you with this, and somebody can do a little homework on this. We'll look at this in a second. And if anyone is out there that wants to do this and come back next week, I would do it. This is something that I would do and show you live, and I will in the future once I get my stuff back together. Make this developer try it and compare the results. Talk a little bit about the varnish in his book. You might find that interesting. And one thing that I found very interesting, the plate preservation, we'll look at that as well too. So again, this is Charles Gamble's 1895 Introduction to the Practice of Wet Collodion Photography. So let's look at this first as an example. I'm coming along and he's got this section on direct positives. He calls them ferrotypes because probably was doing a lot of tintypes, ferrotypes. And so this is, I found this interesting because it seems like the potassium nitrate is always included when they're making ferrotypes. And we'll look at this and give you an example of why that might be. But here, right off the bat, you look at this first recipe and you say, man, I don't know what grains are. What are minims? And I kind of know what ounces are. You know, how do I handle this? And what do you mean this is a developer? You're putting nitric acid and you're putting potassium nitrate or saltpeter in it. We talked a little bit about this before. I gave you an example of a guy, I think he was here in Colorado, years and years ago. I think it was 2004. We had this symposium and we shared some photographs. He was a American Civil War reenactor, I believe. And he put his tintypes up there. And man, they were like silvery, shiny, like almost blinding. And this is what it does. And this is, we'll talk about this, but this formula is due to Mr. J. Spiller, whoever that is or was, upon mixing the iron protosulfate with the potassium nitrate. In other words, when you mix the ferrous sulfate with the saltpeter, the double decomposition takes place. We've talked a lot about double decomposition in this show. We've talked about specifically how that exchange of ions in the silver bath with the collodionized or the iodized plate, a collodion, going into the silver bath and that double decomposition that forms the halogens or the iodides and bromides on it. The same process here where it's changing this out. So double decomposition takes place and we get basically ferrous sulfate, nitrate, and potassium sulfate. Those are the byproducts of this. You have the main component that changes, and then you have some ancillary compounds or ions that come off of that. Now, here's the key. The developer gives a much whiter deposit than does the iron sulfate often used. It's interesting. And what he means there, a whiter deposit, which is an interesting way to say the reduction of the metallic silver is brighter, and it is. Saltpeter or potassium nitrate can act as a restrainer as well too. Has a tendency to do a little bit of that, and it also gives a basically like he says, it puts more silver down, and the silver that it puts down is brighter, whiter deposit than the ferrous sulfate. Right off the bat, interesting formula, interesting idea. Like I said, if I was doing this, if I was set up, I would give you an example of this right now. But if somebody wants to try this, come back next week, show us your ferrous sulfate plate and show us your Gamble saltpeter plate and see. Same situation. You have to kind of do it in a studio with artificial light to get the similar results. So it's not completely scientific, but we'll get closer to that. So there's the formula. I've translated this a little bit. So grains to grams, 10 grains is 0.65 grams, or 1 grain is 0.065. 100 grains is 6.5 ounces to milliliters. That's pretty easy, right? And minims to milliliters is 6.2, or 10 minims is 0.62. You can do the math there. This is the direct positive developer. So saltpeter or potassium nitrate, 6.5 grams. In fact, if you didn't want to make 300 milliliters, just half this, 3 1/4, 4 1/2, 17 1/4, and whatever that is, 0.75 on the nitric acid and 150 mils of distilled water. Somebody should try that and come back. And if you don't, I'll do it when I get set up again, and I'll show you some of these examples. This is a great first example as you break open a 19th century or early 20th century wet collodion book, and you come across something like this, and you say, hey, I want to see if this is legitimate. Put it together. It's a simple, you have everything. Maybe you might get some potassium nitrate. You should have some potassium nitrate, really. But everything else you should have. And you can experiment a little bit with that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Somebody should try this and let us know. No alcohol. Hans Descourt. No alcohol. John, you'll do it. 1 or 2 anyway. I'll send you an image. Oh, beautiful. Okay. So John in New Mexico is going to commit himself to doing the saltpeter Gamble test. And if you follow this recipe exactly, you will see a significant difference in, now, whether you like it or not, it's irrelevant. What we're doing here is we're learning about chemistry and these different ideas of what compounds do what to this reduction of silver. Are we back? Sorry. I guess a big eagle flew over and chewed on the interwebs cable. I don't know. So we're back. Good. Let me address Hans's question. No alcohol. You do not want to put alcohol in your developer if you don't have to. Well, I don't want to put alcohol in it. So can I not put alcohol in it? Well, that depends on how saturated your silver bath is with those solvents. So in other words, if you smell your bath, or if you've dropped a bunch of big plates in your bath, you're going to have to put some alcohol in your developer. And if you don't, you're going to have those starts and stops, those sweeps, those islands. That alcohol allows, if you don't have alcohol in there, the solvents in your silver bath is going to fight the developer all the way. So If you haven't ran your silver bath hard, John, no alcohol. Don't put any alcohol in this developer. Committed, yes, yeah, right. Good, I appreciate it. I knew somebody would do this. It's not that big of a deal. This is a very basic thing that people even starting out, I don't generally recommend to experiment when you're first starting out, but at least you can start to understand what some of these compounds do in the certain areas. This happens to be developer. Will this also help getting more density with negatives? Probably it will not, unfortunately. The problem, this is a different, I shouldn't have said it deposits more. It deposits brighter silver, meaning the size of the silver is a little different and it reflects and it's got a more neutral color, a brighter white, like he says. People loved it on ferrotypes or tin types. Just crank that contrast up. Look at the 19th century portraits. A lot of people say, why don't our portraits look like that? Well, a lot of these guys shot a big lens on a tiny plate and had a bunch of space around it, cleaned out right to the sweet spot. They used compounds like this to really ramp up the contrast and the three-dimensionality of the image. They always use natural light. And their approach, especially optically, was quite a bit different than ours. So, Jeffrey, yes. No, Pablo, you can find potassium nitrate there. Absolutely, you can. This is just saltpeter. This is a common compound. It's almost like gelatin. There's nothing toxic. There's nothing, I mean, really, I mean, you can consume saltpeter, but I wouldn't recommend you do. There's this old tale that when you're in the military and especially in basic training and stuff, they put saltpeter in your food. It how do I say this gracefully? It prevents the man from having these urges, and biologically the blood flow is restricted a little bit. Let's say this, it's the opposite of Viagra. It's the opposite of Viagra, if you will. So the purpose of the nitric acid, it does, Jeffrey, act as a restrainer a little bit, but in essence, what it does, it deposits a brighter silver on your highlights. It is a little bit of the nitric acid, I'm sorry. The nitric acid, yes, because you're depositing so much, that will keep your shadows or your void areas clear. And so that's exactly what it is. It's nitric acid is absolutely a restrainer. And as well, potassium nitrate is a little bit of a restrainer too. Let's see who we've got in here. Sorry. I always have to do this, don't I? StreamYard is always collapsing my windows down and I can't see down at the bottom here. So forgive me for just a second. So yeah, I appreciate John taking that up, and we will look at that. And just to be fair, we're going to need an example of your regular developer as well too. So plate with your regular developer. Mauricio, hello. So that's one example. So you're coming through this old literature, and a lot of it is going to be just like, God, they just ramble on about things. And I'm sure piece on page 34 of this book. I've tried to leave the book page numbers in there so you can see these. Here's a very interesting approach to varnish. What's interesting here, though, and this happens to be this Moser's Super Blonde Shellac Flakes. That happens to be orange shellac, by the way. He says a sample of orange shellac, methylated spirit is the best, and a small piece of pumice, say an ounce or 30 grams, right? 28 grams. And a clean, dry pint bottle fitted with a sound cork. The pumice is to be broken up into small pieces the size of peas. And he demands what is going on? How long were we gone? Were we gone a while? Are we still gone? Everybody's frozen. Hold on here. Are we back? No? Yes? Just a few seconds. Okay, let me start over. I don't know what's going on. We got nice, big, bright blue skies here today. My internet should be okay. Let's go back. So what he's talking about here is a shellac varnish using methylated spirits in orange shellac. This super blonde from Moser's actually happens to be orange shellac. If you don't know what shellac is, it comes from the female lac bug, a lac bug, a little tiny insect, and it's the fecal matter or the shit from that bug, if you will. And we mix it up with, in this case, Mr. Gamble is insisting that you use methylated spirits. Does anybody know what methylated spirits are? Anybody? Sound like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Anybody? Methylated spirits? Anybody? Methylated spirits are what we call denatured alcohol. So he's demanding that you use a denatured alcohol here. Isn't that interesting? Shake thoroughly until the shellac is dissolved and allow it to stand in sunlight until the sediment settles. What do you think the pumice is for? The 28 or 30 grams of pumice broken up to pea size. What do you think that's for? Anybody? Pea size pea size pumice? Anybody? Pumice. Yeah.
Sorry, is it to absorb the debris?
That's an interesting hypothesis because it is volcanic rock, right? So it is porous. It's actually to break up the shellac. It's like putting an agitator, marbles in something. So you shake it up. Shellac needs a little encouragement to be dissolved that way. So he adds the pumice, and that's why he says to let it settle, allow it to stand in the sunlight so it's warm, and it helps melt it as well. And then pour away the supernatant liquid through a funnel. Basically filter it, let it settle, and then filter it out. You know what I do? This is not very different from what you'll read in my book about varnish. I happen to use gum sandrack, but any of it's good. I make it in the 750 milliliter or so, or 1.75 liter alcohol bottles, the glass ones. And I mix it and then let all of it settle down for about a week. All that fine dust will come down and settle. And then I put a pipette in there and decant. Or you could use a decanter and decant the good stuff and leave the settled stuff. That's what he's talking about there. Yes, Jean says sometimes French book they use a spirit de vin. Yes, spirit of wine to call alcohol. Yeah, that would not be methylated spirits, though, Jean. That would be, if you can drink it, that's not methylated. What we're talking about here is an alcohol with a denaturant in it that prevents you from drinking it. Now, why Mr. Gamble wants you to use that in your shellac varnish, I'm not completely sure, but he's insistent on that. So, couple of examples. Like, oh, I can make an interesting developer that I've never used before, and I can try some of this varnish. Now, keep in mind, guys, these people worked 10 or 12 hours a day, you know, in the right seasons of making plates every single day. Most of them were absolute commercial photographers. They wanted to make money with it. So it's not like a lot of us out here doing artwork with it and personal projects, and we're not really trying. I mean, there's a lot of people working commercially with it too, but they were looking for the best solutions for the commercial application. Highest quality image, what pleased the customer the most, all that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. These guys worked every single day in it, far more than anybody working in the process today does. Far, far more. I don't care what example you give, you're not going to come close to these people working 10, 12 hours a day, 15 hours a day in the summertime. And then in the winter, they had a whole other regime they used. Yes, Craig said break up shellac. I just looked at that. Yes, Craig, you're absolutely correct. Shellac happens, right? Shellac does happen, Jeffrey. Yeah. Oh, Jan says I have two tin types developed with 4 grams of potassium in 750 milliliters. Very white silver areas. Exactly right. Yep. Try that recipe specifically with the nitric acid. Try that recipe specifically that Gamble recommends, that previous screen, and see what happens. You might even have a little bit different outcomes there. So a couple of examples. Developer and let's go back there. Developer and varnish, shellac varnish. So let's go to the next one here. Plate preservation. This is going to blow you guys away. This is something that I have never. I've read this book a couple of times. As you see, this is in the appendix. And in this book as well, he has all the conversions for, the old school apothecary drachmas and drams and all that kind of stuff too. So the appendix is loaded with stuff. It's almost as big as the book itself. It's not a very big book, actually. Now, Jat Singh, hello, hello from India. Hello, welcome. Good to see you. Yeah, show us that, Jan, if you have it. If you can jump into StreamYard, there's enough places here, I believe. Let's see who's down here. Dang it, I don't know how. I do this every single time. Hold on, guys. Let me see if I can get another person in here. They have a terrible design on this interface, if you ask me. I can't see down below the first level of people in StreamYard, so I have a hard time getting access down here. Let's see. Who is that? I don't know. No, can't get to it. Sorry, guys. I can't get to whoever's down. Oh, I just saw you there. Pop up. Oh, that's Jan. It's Jan. Hold on. Sorry. Why did they do this to me? I can't get to him. Okay, I gotta. There we go, Jan. Hello, welcome. Let's put you up on the full screen here. Solo layout. There you go, Jan. Can you show us a comparison though, so we kind of know what we're like? One that, see, what we need is one with a regular ferrous sulfate and one with a potassium nitrate. Yeah, that'll be a good. See if we can tell a difference. You will tell a difference in these. I've seen these before, and they're. I don't know if it was the 6 grams a night. Well, that would be okay. Yeah. Okay. That is pretty white. Unmute yourself there, Jan. We can't hear you. Yeah, those are pretty. It's hard to tell, though, isn't it?
You will see it.
Okay. There you go.
Yes, and this is warm.
This is warm. Okay, I see. I just saw one. Yeah, okay. I can see that just a little bit. That was with regular ferrous sulfate developer.
Yes, that's with your receipt.
Okay, excellent. Yes. Yeah, you can tell a little bit. You can tell a little bit. Do you like the potassium nitrate?
Yes, on still lifes it's okay, but I prefer on portrait. I prefer the old receipt you have.
Yeah. It's a little more less contrasty, a little more full, a little.
And it's more yellow. It's more sepia.
Warm
yeah,
is
warm.
Yes,
Yes,
in English. Yeah,
much
exactly.
People.
Excellent. Thank you, Jan. That's good. Yeah, good. Excellent. Perfect. Oh, there we go. Okay. Thank you for sharing those, Jan. So here's something that I think you'll find interesting. This is, and we want to be careful here how he uses these words. Preparation of plates for prolonged exposures, okay? So I'm thinking, oh, what is this? So I'm just going to read this to you. When the plates are to receive very prolonged exposures. The following method, due to Spiller and Crookes, Journal of the Photographic Society of Great Britain, Volume 3, pages 44-45. And this is the same J. Spiller that he got his saltpeter recipe from, may be used. So the number 1 solution, silver nitrates, 10 grains. Anybody know how many 10 grains is? I think if we do this, let's do this. If we go back here, 10 grains is 0.65 grams, okay? Just FYI. So a little over a half a gram of silver nitrate, 300 minims of pure glacial acidic acid, okay? That's the strong stuff. That's what we use most. What is 300 minims? Anybody have an idea? If you look back here, you see 100 minims is 6.2. So that's about what, 20 milliliters of the pure glacial acidic acid, and then 300 milliliters of distilled water. That's number 1. And number 2, he points out, and we talked about this, 0.23 is the specific gravity of this glycerin he wants you to use. Remember, we talked a little bit about how this, if they put, .80, .72, those are all specific gravity readings. He wants you, basically he's saying you have to have the correct content of glycerin suspended in a solution for this to work. Mix for use when required, 1 part by volume. Say 1 fluid ounce of number 1. So let's just make it easy and say 30 mils of number 1 with 3 parts of number 2. So 30 mils versus 90 on the glycerin. The plate, after sensitizing, is immersed in distilled water for 4 minutes. Remove and flow over the surface several times the mixed solution, given well drain and expose. So, in other words, you take, if you've ever done dry collodion, you take all your stuff is the same. You take your plate out of the bath and you put it in distilled water. And he's saying that needs to be immersed in that distilled water for 4 minutes, right? So basically you're washing all the free silver off of it. Basically, that's why you have to reintroduce some in this mixture. Remove and flow over the surface several times the mixed solution, given well drain and expose. After exposure, place from 2 to 3 minutes, a little bit, 2 to 3 minutes in a 30 grain silver nitrate solution. So who was it the other day? Somebody sent me an email saying, hey, somebody just posted on a forum or somewhere on Facebook, says you could re-immerse your plate after, if you have these extended exposures. Well, guess where that comes from? Right here, right here. So you make your exposure's, 30 minutes or I don't know, whatever prolonged exposures are. And then you put it back in a 30 grain silver bath. It's a weakened silver bath, right? And we talked about 30 and 40 grain silver baths. Into 30 grain silver nitrate solution in distilled water, kept for the purpose, meaning that's dedicated to that. Move the plate about and then withdraw and develop. The plates may be developed with the iron or acid, pyroacid developer, either ferrous sulfate or pyro. The plates will stand 21 days exposure, but deteriorate slowly. 21 days. I love that last part. How long is your exposure? Oh, my exposure is 20 days, right? So why, here's the question. I was going to give this to someone to try. It's a little more complicated, a little more involved with a silver bath, and I don't want to put anybody out. I will do this. I will run this, and they're not going to be like dry plates, obviously, but once you get that glycerin in there, you're not drying out anytime soon. So I would run some tests to see how far you can push this. The longest I've ever gone with a normal plate, and these were actually pinhole. I was doing pinhole in the wintertime, probably minus 10 Celsius. And I went 32 minutes 32 minutes with a regular positive image. Because it's cold, it was wet, I kept the plate holder flat. I did a couple of tricks that kind of extended that time. But once you dry out, you lose sensitivity, hence the wet collodion process, right? So we will try this. If anybody's ambitious and wants to try this, do it and come on back into the show and report. If not, I will definitely do this when I get set back up here in a little bit. But I just love that last line there. The plates will stand 21 days exposure, but deteriorate rapidly after. That's just awesome. I love it. So, do we have any questions? Anybody want to address anything or talk about anything? Talk about your feelings. And I'll watch the chat too. We got 26 people in the YouTube show and a few here in StreamYard. So I know there's got to be some questions out there. These books, and they're all going to be very similar, especially after you get after the late 1870s on up to the turn of the century. They're easy to read, easier to read. Some of them have got really funky ideas in them, I have to admit. And you'd have to be there, I guess, at the time to understand why they'd put so much effort and concern into something that really doesn't help us a lot, depending, it just depends on what you're doing, right? I mean, you create recipes, you use techniques that suit what you're doing. That's the beautiful thing about this is you can come into this process and approach it completely different than anyone else and be successful at it and have great success with it. The problem is if you don't know the methodology and how you got there, you can't repeat it or tell other people how you do it or whatever. And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about what they do or what they use. There seems to be a little bit of proprietary stuff a lot of people want to have in this process, but it doesn't last long because most of the stuff that I see out there that's proprietary is kind of BS. It's circumventing some things. I had somebody write me or post or something. I got a message pop up. Hey, I can't. It was the color of the image. They wanted a sepia tone, or I think it was sepia tone. How do I get sepia tone? I heard a maker use copper sulfate in the developer, and it produces warm tones. BS. I mean, that's just untrue. Number one, warm tones come from the fix and how much silver and how much silver you keep on the plate, and the KCN fix will give you the warm tones. So a lot of times people, and then there's other people that try to come up with these different variances in the process and try to get a leg up and try to get some traction or interest in what they're doing, and then they keep their process kind of quiet. So at the end of the day, I try to share everything. I try to share it because I'm not, I mean, why not? If people can use it, I want to share it. If I have success with it or failures with it, I want to tell people how to avoid that or how to accomplish that, hopefully. Doug Darling, hello, brother. Quinn, how much will temp and relative humidity play on the extended plates? Actually, now I can't speak to gambles, what we just looked, the preservation of plates. I have never done that. But what I have done is mix 50-50 glycerin. And your plates, like he said, I think I did a glycerin plate I kept for 10 days and washed it off. Perfect. No problem. That glycerin just, and unless you're in extreme temperatures, which you might be, but if you kept them in your vehicle or something where it was semi-warm and you're working outdoors, and if you didn't have them out too long, that glycerin will keep those plates wet for a long time. So I can't really answer that 100%, but I don't think you'd have any problems. I think extreme heat might affect it more than extreme cold. Melting the glycerin down or removing it, that kind of thing, that might happen. But again, I have not played with developer or extended plates that way, developing after other than the glycerin and distilled water mix. Yeah, sugar developer. So Jan, sugar developer is an organic restrainer. And you have to understand the difference between a chemical restrainer and an organic restrainer. And in fact, if you download Gamble's book and read it, he will describe those two things for you. One, the organic restrainer, sugar, honey, beer, molasses, is a physical restraint. It kind of crowds out and keeps development from happening that way, where a chemical restraint works on a little bit different principle. It works on the ion level, if you will. So sugar developer crowds, or honey or beer, molasses, whatever you want to use, kind of crowds that space out. Yes, stronger thiosulfate gives you warmer tones. The 20-30% gives you warmer tones. The ultimate warm plate will come from the tiniest amount of developer you can do on the plate and cover it, and the KCN fix. Those will give you the warmest tones. Once you get into the thiosulfate fixers and the ammonium thiosulfate fixers, the warm tones are a little bit different, but they are warm, but they're just a little bit different. And sugar is just an organic restrainer, space restrainer, if you will. Chopper says, would extended exposure method allow the collodion to remain more flexible? Thinking someday I might want to use acrylic sheet as a temporary curved negative on a panoramic camera. Oh, interesting. That's interesting. Well, Chopper, the bottom line is if you were doing this process legitimately, that collodion would never dry out, right? Be a wet collodion process, hence the word wet. But once you add glycerin in there, yes, collodion is flexible until it dries, right? And it's still flexible. They made film out of it, right? That's what all the nitrate film was, right? Again, Inglourious Bastards, if you haven't seen the movie, go rent it, go grab it and watch the end of the film. It's all about nitrocellulose. So yes, I think that would be, I think that would work very well. That's an interesting question. And I didn't put Doug's question up there, but how much will the temp and relative humidity play on the extended plates? I'll go back and say, I don't think, unless they're extreme, I don't think you have to worry about too much that way. Yeah, good stuff, guys. Let's jump over here and look at, Renzo is not in StreamYard. How can we critique your photographs if you're not in StreamYard, Renzo? We need you in StreamYard. We can't look at your plates unless if you want us to look at them. I'm happy to do that. If you guys want to look at these, let's do this. You can give Renzo some feedback. So I'm going to click through these, and then I'll come back to them, and you guys can comment on these, okay? I think Renzo is out of Belgium. I hope I'm right. I don't know why I have Belgium on my mind, but. And he talks about vanitas, and if you the Dutch vanitas, this really, way before I read Becker, I looked at vanitas, and they deal with death denial and death anxiety, right? The skull, the time, the flowers, birth, death, life, time, all those things. And he was telling me via email that he deals with that a lot. And then a couple of portraits here at the end. So let's go back to the first and just start real quick. Anybody have anything to say about these? Jump in, unmute yourself and jump on in if you have something to say. Oh, Renzo says, so sorry about this. Renzo, you're here. That's good. Giving me problem. I have to connect. Don't know why. Okay, that's okay, Renzo. We're going. He's commenting in on the YouTube chat. Hank says, pic of someone who sniffed too much ether. You mean yours, Hank? I saw you with your wig on the other day. That's what I thought too. That's interesting. So if you have some, it's okay, Renzo, no problem. If you have some feedback, give him. let me start. If nobody's going to jump in here, I always have something to say, always, about photographs. I don't know why, but I do. No, I'm alive. Oh, I got you. Yeah. I forget Hank is in the Netherlands, so he knows all about Dutch vanitas. Okay. Vanitas. So here's the thing. Renzo, the first thing that I noticed, okay, Jan, I like plate number 2, dark, but still tonality stronger, mystic. Okay, good, excellent. The first thing I noticed, and if you go back and watch the video where we talked about Terry Barrett's book, Criticizing Photography or Criticizing Photographs, the first thing that, I guess I'm just a creature of habit, I go in and I describe what I'm seeing if I don't know anything about the photograph. So I'm going to describe that this is a statue head with a seashell. There's another photograph there and some books. And so what we're implicating or implying here, there's something to do with the sea. There's something to do with antiquity. We can't really see what the books are. And then there's some kind of memento mori or some kind of image there we're sharing with somebody. Technically, they're pretty full plates. It looks like he's using artificial light, probably CFL. I don't know. He didn't give me a lot of information on these, but I'm just going to describe what I see. And then what I do see on most of them, and I wanted to describe this, you see these? You're going to see them on every one of his plates, and we'll talk about that here shortly. But down here, there's a photograph of someone, and it does. When you start looking at the photograph long enough, you understand that you are dealing with death or loss here. And it plays into reminding you of your impending death. That's hard to take, right? When we remind people that they're going to die, you read Becker's Death Denial, you'll understand this. People start freaking out and doing weird things. And there's Solomon Sheldon's terror management theory. If you read Worm at the Core, you'll understand these implications of looking at work like this and what it does to people visually. So now here we really get into, now you've got a skull and flowers and, a platter. I'm not sure, again, what's going on here. One thing I would say, Renzo, is, and you already know this because you've made plates, the more complex the image is, especially with the same colors and tonalities, the more difficult it is to read. What collodion can't necessarily, I shouldn't say this in the absolute terms, but it has a difficult time with complex images. The more basic the image, the better the image for the viewer. It's a quick read. You can get it. You can understand it. And again, we have a little bit of this going on up here in the corner. We'll talk about that in just a second. So now, having said that, here's your image. Here's your life interacting with death, period. This is Death Denial. Clean, easy to read, right off the bat. You've got a living person with an implied human skull. Again, coming down in here and coming down in here. We'll talk about those in just a minute. And now even cleaner. The halo here kind of works. These are all sweeps, developer sweeps, and some of them are drying out just a tiny bit. It's starting to change and close in. Remember, this is the bottom of the plate, so it's upside down. So you can kind of see the flow depending on how he's flowing, his developer and all that stuff. And then the last one, something similar here. And again, islands, sweeps. This is just probably a big island up here where you probably didn't really get good developer. And again, possibly sweeps are just beginning to dry out here. But let's go back. We'll let other people kind of comment here. This is Jan likes this one the best, huh? Oh, there we go. Okay, 8 by 10. Oh, let me put these. He's talking to us here. I totally missed this. The image talks about time passing and the virtues of life. Absolutely. Yes, exactly. I do. Here's the thing, Renzo. When you're talking to an audience, that may not know about Dutch vanitas or not understand the history of art or the symbolism, what we in English say, there's semantics, right? Wordplay, and there's semiotics, visual play. And so in English, we talk about semiotics and what they mean. And this is what's happening here. If you have that information, you can, evening, winter, light. That's interesting. Huh, that's interesting. Okay. I would have guessed, if I was a betting man, I would have put CFL. 8x10 tintypes. I can tell that. And one of the things I would ask is if you see kind of a haze of the milky developer showing up. Some of the plates, some of the aluminum or aluminium plates have a different surface they've treated, and it turns your developer milky and then puts big halo and rings on the plate. You'll see this everywhere. I used to get 2 or 3 emails a month. What happened? Big rings on plates and big thing. Oh yeah, my developer turns milky about 10 seconds in. So I don't know if that's happening to Renzo, but yeah, flowers are a symbol. Last one is in the studio. Okay. And then Linda says, in the first plate, it looks like the skull is coming out from the soil, like from the grave. Oh, that's great. Great commentary there. I like that. Yeah, the first one. The first one, is this the one you mean, Linda? I'm not sure. Or that one, coming out of the grave. People seem to like that one the most. And then comment on the portraits here, if you would, Renzo. Jeffrey says the first plate makes me think of relics too. Yes, I agree. That's what I get. I get in Athens. There's books there, but the photograph tells me that there's some kind of memory, a loss of something. But I do agree with that. Yep, happens to me. There you go. So here you go. So these rings, guys, these rings he's talking about, not to take away from his work, but these rings are from the surface of these aluminitypes or aluminum plates. That is a very common kind of thing. I haven't seen it here in America for a while, but depending on where you get your plates from, your mileage may vary, as they say. So yes, that's fine. And that's important to say. I would like to say that making perfect plates are not my interest. That's perfectly fine to say. And I like to mess it up just right. Yeah. You know Sally Mann, you know who she is? She says every time she pours a plate, she prays for the angels of serendipity to show up, right? The angels of chance. The angels like, here's my plate, do something with it interesting. I get that to a certain degree. I do. I get it. I get that. Linda says, I love plate number 2 with the skull and the hands. It's so cool. The first was the skull and the flower I meant. Oh, yes, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah. So Linda was talking not the very first place, the relics Jeffrey talked about, but the second one, the skull coming out of the flowers of the grave. I thought that was it. That when you said that, that's a good observation. And then, yeah, me personally, if you're going for something like this plate really speaks to that. I know it's straightforward. I get it. But you are showing, I don't know that this would be classified as a Veneta, but it could be. I mean, I guess, especially if you put a watch back there or something, right? But no, this to me speaks right. I mean, we're all going to end up like this. Every single one of us are going to end up like this. Remember what Richard Avedon says? He said, in the end, we're all skulls. We're all skulls, right? We're worm food. We're gods with anuses, as Becker says. The soft gold tone is perfect. Yeah, great. Yes, good stuff. Good stuff. It's a visual diary of the session and the haste made that day. Good. No, I am really glad you shared your work with us to get an idea. People will get to see your name. Post a link up there. Post a link so people can find. I would have put it in, but I didn't have it. So if you come on here and show your work, post a link up so people can check you out. The great thing about the community, there's a lot of good people in this community. There really are a lot of good people that want to share information and help one another, bounce ideas off. But they can't do that if they don't know you, or they don't know what you're doing with your work, or they don't, they can't understand what you're trying to get to. Linda just gave some really, really great insight to your images there, which, you know, that's wonderful. It's just food for thought. You just take it in and you make it work. Pablo says, life death seems to be always speak about when making photos. That includes time passing by and such. You're so right, amigo. That is a very good observation, because if you read Susan Sontag on photography, it's a dense read, but she says exactly that, Pablo. Exactly. It's a photography it's built into it to remind you that we are going to die. And and not to be morbid about this is just like, you know, any hard talk you have in life about reality. We're all going to die. And if you want to understand that more, and you go into Ernest Becker's book, Death Denial, or there's a couple of his that really deals with this greatly, The Problem with Evil. But Death Denial really lays out for the human being these triggers that remind us of our impending death. And so photography, it's built into that, just like Pablo said. It's a great insight. And if you keep that in mind, and if you work with that in mind, help people understand, help people approach death, I think photography can be very therapeutic or cathartic to understanding your own impending peril or your own impending demise. Nobody's going to live forever. We just have to deal with that, right? Enjoy your life as much as you can. That's when I get on. I was telling Pablo the other day, you know, you get on Facebook or any of these other, you know, you can't stay too long because it just, these people arguing about, you need to get a life. You only have this much time, guy, and you're pissing it away arguing about, you know, a mask or a vaccine or something. It drives me nuts. Anyway, yes. Renzo says, thanks for sharing your time. Thanks for sharing your work, Renzo. And Linda says, nice work. Thanks for sharing, Renzo. Good. Yeah. That's good. We'll leave it at that. And again, just another person that you can get to know, drop him an email, you know, get to know one another in the community. I think a lot of times we tend to put people on a pedestal and everybody else is here. Let's level the community out and start helping us peers rather than, you know, kind of a hierarchy. I know people are intimidated by certain people in the community and they don't feel like they have the knowledge or the expertise to share things. And I know I've complained about this before but these people that think that don't do that. They don't go out and babble about stuff they shouldn't babble. Coming into a group like this and sharing your work, people can get to know you and you can start having conversations with one another. And that's really, I think that's important. That's it for me, guys. There's my book. You can find it everywhere. That's the only thing I do here. No Patreon, no YouTube advertisements, none of that stuff. All good. I appreciate. Sad I came too late. You can watch the video again. Craig says, thank you, Renzo. Obviously, guess what I've got to do? I've got to go to work. This is my play for the day, and I got to go work on my house. So I hope you join me next week. I hope everybody's safe and happy. And gracias a todo. Nos vemos pronto. Sí. De nada, mi amigo. I appreciate that. I know the hours seem short, but I hope it's fulfilling and I hope it's worthwhile. You guys spend your time with me. I greatly appreciate it. Send me your comments, your message, your technical questions. Somebody wants to share work next week. Come in and share your work. You don't have to be a pro. You don't have to be anything. Come in here and have people get ideas from people. So it's all good. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Saturday. Stay safe. Muchas gracias por todo. Thank you for everything. We'll see you next week. I'm trying to practice my Spanish for Pablo. Bye-bye.